we're on the long path of calibration. We've done the rough calibration, and that was to get you used to entering the new code into the config file, learning about the different measurements and all that, so you're comfortable before you actually put any power on. We then done the calibration, and that was to get the machine into a rough working position. Then we noticed that there was some binding of some links and that sort of thing when we tried to do the positioning of the probe locking side of things. So we've modified the carriages and all that. So then we've managed to get the machine moving without binding. We've managed to put the settings in that we've measured up, and then we were doing a bed 000. And as you know, we used the little laser dot to put it in. We drew the cross up, line it up with the nozzle tip. We then put the piece of, I used the 5mm, you could use the 4mm tool steel, set the height, and then we accurately set the home, Z home position, and we knew that measurement, so we knew if we went down to Z.1 of a millimetre it would stop at 0.1. So we're quite happy. But then we got our ruler out and we measured from each tower, column, upright, whatever you like to call it, extrusion, vertical extrusion, all the same. We then measured the distances away. If it was in the centre, it would be exactly the same measurement, and ours was out. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that you've set your stops up the top. The arms are coming down on an angle, and they're coming down the same amount from the stops. We assume that those angles of those arms are all the same. But what happens if one stop is this much higher than the other two? That means that arm pulls up and the whole thing moves in the direction of the one that is the highest. So then when you lower it all, the point, instead of being in the 0, 0 position, is further this way. And that's what we had. We had it closer to the Z column, tower, vertical upright. So what that means is that the software thinks it's here, in reality it's over here. So we have to adjust it. How do we adjust it? Well, first of all, you measure the height from the carriage trigger point to the position on the triggering micro switch. So you can put your ruler on, just push it up till it lights up, and then measure it. And they should be the same for the whole three. Now, when I got to the Z axis, the Z column, tower, it was out by 2.5mm. Even though the top of the aluminium extrusions, the one pointing up vertically and the one horizontally, are flush. I put the ruler across the top. It can be position, it can be the carriage thickness, it can be the thickness of where it's actually held. There's many reasons why. As we've seen, the build quality isn't that great, so the whole thing could be twisted this way, that way, whatever. We set this vertical and we set this horizontal, so we know that's 90. We then check the table, so we know the table is correct. So that just means we have to put it packer. Now some people will put a screw into the carriage, like the sheet metal screw, and then you can screw that in and then adjust it. A known thread would be better, so you would know it would need a turn. Say it's 2.5mm out, and so if you had a thread that had a 1mm pitch, you could turn it 2.5 turns and you would know. Just keep it simple. Also, you could undo the top of the top frame, tap that one down, and hopefully see if it distorted or didn't pull the arms and all that sort of stuff. So that's another option. But the third option I just used is I just got a packer. It can be a piece of aluminium, piece of plastic, doesn't really matter. Just whatever you have laying around your workshop. So I just undone the screw of the end stop, lowered it down, put the packer in, pushed in the limit switch up and just tighten it up. So then when the carriage hits, it is still squashing the sandwich and still secure. I haven't glued it, it's just held in there by the force. They now all measure up a lot more accurate. That means that all these positions are now changed. So instead of being the known Z position that we get from our M114, is now different. So I homed, then I set Z to 10mm off the table, and I then measured it. Now with your vernier, they're great for areas that you can get into, but you can't really measure nozzle height. Even if you could get in there, you've got this height up here, so it's difficult to measure. You can try to eyeball it with the ruler. A great tool is a taper ruler. You may not have seen these before. They're mainly used for measuring diameters, just so you're sorting through your washer, nuts and bolts and washers and which size, and you just slide it in, and when it stops, that's the diameter. So it's imperial and metric. 1 mil is that much distance, and they're stepped off in 0.1 of a mil. So pretty accurate. What you have to do, just have it on the bed, slide it in and touch it on the bottom of the nozzle. Now that's reading 8.7 mil. I've got 2 sheets of paper there. I'll explain why in a minute. So if they're 0.1, we'll say another 0.2. So that's 8.9. So just by shifting the top by 2.5 mil, it's changed the height here by 1.1 mil. You can see there's a ratio, not a 1-to-1, but there is a change. So if you make a change, don't think your other settings are still going to be fine. They're not. You have to check and always be safe. But the other reason why I've got it is that now I can just have it pointing into the direction of the axis, slide it in till it touches, draw a line either side of the ruler, then do the Z, X and Y, and then I've got the intersecting lines, and then I can just easily repeat that and check my measurements. So now I would raise the head up and just measure in, and that will tell me, well, even now that's telling me that's pretty close to 150. So just repeat that until you get your heights the same, and that will mean that your carriage assembly, your effector assembly, will be in the center. Then you can go back and adjust your Z height once you have done that. So once you've done that dog chasing its tail, like I mentioned before, you would have had it set square, height's right, and know that the effector's in the center. Then you can then continue on to the probing side of things and set the probing up. So that will be next.